I'm the woman everyone loved to hate, although almost nobody knew the real story. For years, people across the internet painted me as the ambitious singer who had manipulated her way into marrying one of the country's most admired billionaires. According to the headlines, I had stolen another woman's happy ending, trapped a powerful CEO into marriage, and destroyed the greatest romance that never actually existed. I stopped trying to defend myself a long time ago. There was no point arguing with millions of strangers who had already decided I was the villain. They saw glamorous photos, carefully edited interviews, and gossip articles. They didn't see what my marriage actually looked like behind closed doors. My husband, Ethan Carter, was the reserved CEO of Carter Dynamics, a technology company that seemed to make headlines every month for another groundbreaking invention. The media adored him because he was handsome, disciplined, intelligent, and almost impossible to provoke. They adored his childhood friend, famous actress Victoria Hayes, even more. She was America's sweetheart, elegant, talented, and always smiling despite the endless rumors claiming she and Ethan secretly belonged together. Whenever he invested in one of her films or attended an event to support one of her charity projects, social media exploded with edits, fan videos, and comments about their destined love story. I was simply the obstacle standing in the way of everyone's favorite fantasy. Every interview Victoria gave only made things worse. She never directly encouraged the rumors, but she never truly shut them down either. She would smile sadly whenever reporters mentioned Ethan before saying that some relationships didn't need labels to be meaningful. Those carefully chosen words fueled another week of headlines while I received thousands of messages accusing me of ruining true love. My husband's parents weren't exactly helping my reputation either. They had never publicly criticized me, but they certainly hadn't welcomed me with open arms. At our wedding they looked polite rather than happy, and Ethan's younger sister, Chloe, refused to call me her sister-in-law. She always addressed me by my first name as if acknowledging our relationship would somehow betray Victoria. The public noticed everything. Videos analyzing every family gathering collected millions of views, each one concluding that the Carter family couldn't wait for Ethan to divorce me. The hashtag asking when our marriage would finally end never seemed to disappear. I learned to ignore it. As long as Ethan and I understood each other, complete strangers didn't matter. Besides, my life wasn't exactly miserable. I had a successful music career, financial security, and a husband who, despite appearing cold in public, somehow managed to become the clingiest person I'd ever met whenever we were alone. No one would have believed it if I had told them. Honestly, I probably wouldn't have believed it either if I hadn't lived with him. The entire disaster started because Carter Dynamics developed an advanced autonomous drone equipped with artificial intelligence that could follow a designated person while automatically protecting their privacy by avoiding inappropriate footage. The marketing department believed there was no better advertisement than showing viewers a day in the life of their famous CEO. They convinced Ethan to allow the drone to follow him from morning until night during a live broadcast. Apparently everyone knew about this plan except me. Nobody bothered to warn the woman who would eventually appear inside the CEO's home. While thousands of people eagerly waited for the live stream to begin, I was curled up on our living room beanbag wearing an oversized cream-colored bunny hoodie that looked more like children's pajamas than adult clothing. My hair was twisted into a messy clip, there wasn't a trace of makeup on my face, and I was completely focused on winning an online game. I had absolutely no idea millions of people would soon witness the least glamorous version of me imaginable. At the Carter family estate, Ethan's parents and Chloe gathered together to watch the broadcast like everyone else. Chloe folded her arms across her chest and frowned. "Shouldn't somebody have warned Olivia?" she asked. "What if she says something embarrassing?" Her mother calmly shook her head. "If we prepare her, people will think everything is scripted. The entire purpose is to show Ethan's real daily life." Chloe didn't look convinced. "I still don't understand why my brother married her." Neither parent answered. They weren't thrilled about our marriage, but they respected Ethan enough not to interfere. Secretly, they hoped the live stream would reveal whether the rumors about our unhappy relationship were true. If their son was genuinely trapped in a loveless marriage, perhaps they could finally encourage him to walk away. Meanwhile, inside the luxury sedan driving him home, Ethan leaned back with his eyes closed, exhaustion visible even through his usually unreadable expression. He had spent the entire morning unveiling the company's newest technology before sitting through meetings for hours. The chat accompanying the live stream overflowed with admiration. Some praised his work ethic. Others joked that a billionaire CEO was somehow more entertaining than reality television. Then my name appeared. Thousands immediately begged the camera to stay away from me. They wanted one peaceful live stream without seeing the woman they blamed for destroying Ethan and Victoria's supposed future together. Others confidently predicted that the stream would finally expose my true personality. According to them, nobody could pretend to be sweet 24 hours a day. They were about to discover something, although not what they expected. I remained blissfully unaware of the invisible drone floating behind Ethan as he entered our home. I barely glanced toward the hallway when I heard the front door open because I was in the middle of an intense ranked match. Ethan quietly removed his jacket, loosened his tie, poured himself a glass of water, and walked back and forth in front of me several times. I noticed movement in my peripheral vision but ignored it. My teammates needed me more than my husband did for another 30 seconds. Apparently that decision offended him. He stepped directly between me and the television, crossed his arms, and looked down with that familiar expression that outsiders mistook for intimidation but I recognized as annoyance mixed with disappointment. "Playing games again?" he asked in the cool, controlled voice the public knew so well. The live stream chat exploded with excitement. Everyone assumed I would immediately jump to my feet and apologize for ignoring such an important man. After all, my public image suggested I worshipped the ground Ethan walked on. Instead, without even lifting my eyes completely from the screen, I reached up with one hand, gently pushed his face aside so I could see around him, and sighed. "Seriously? Move. You're blocking my match." Ethan blinked once after I shoved his face aside, and for a second the entire world seemed to freeze with him. The live stream chat, which had been moving so fast it was almost impossible to read, suddenly stopped. Then, like a dam bursting, comments flooded every corner of the screen. People couldn't believe what they had just witnessed. The woman they had mocked for years hadn't cowered before the country's most intimidating CEO. She had treated him like an inconvenience standing between her and a mobile game. Across town, Chloe nearly dropped her phone. "Did she seriously just push him away?" she gasped. Even Ethan's parents stared at the television without saying a word. They had expected tension, perhaps awkward politeness, but certainly not this. Ethan remained exactly where he was, looking down at me with an expression no reporter had ever managed to capture. There was no anger in his eyes. Instead, there was something dangerously close to hurt. "Are you tired of me?" he asked quietly. The chat exploded again. Thousands insisted it had to be scripted. Others accused Carter Dynamics of hiring actors because no billionaire would ever sound so pitiful. I finally glanced away from my phone and looked up at him properly. One of his hands rested against the back of the couch beside my head while he leaned over me just enough to trap me between the cushions and his arm. Most people would probably find the pose intimidating. I knew better. This was Ethan's version of sulking. Whenever work kept us apart or I became too focused on something else, he developed the annoying habit of silently demanding attention. He rarely admitted what he wanted. Instead, he would simply appear beside me, invade my personal space, and wait until I gave in. At first I thought it was amusing. Months later I realized it happened almost every week. I sighed dramatically before locking my phone and tossing it onto the couch beside me. "You really picked the worst possible timing," I muttered. He didn't answer. He simply continued looking at me with stubborn determination. I couldn't help smiling despite myself. Sliding both arms around his neck, I leaned forward and kissed the side of his jaw before whispering near his ear, "How could I possibly get tired of you?" His entire body relaxed almost instantly. The tension vanished from his shoulders as though someone had flipped a switch. His ears turned bright red, a reaction he could never control no matter how hard he tried. He wrapped both arms around me with surprising strength, resting his forehead against my shoulder for a brief moment before taking a slow breath. Every viewer watching the live stream collectively lost their minds. Comments flew by so quickly they blurred together. Some claimed it was excellent marketing. Others refused to believe the CEO who terrified corporate rivals was secretly this affectionate. Chloe stared at the screen as though someone had replaced her brother with a completely different person. "Mom. Dad, are we sure that's Ethan?" she whispered. Neither parent answered because they were asking themselves exactly the same question. The son they had raised had always been composed beyond his years. He excelled in school, never complained, rarely expressed emotion, and carried the pressure of becoming heir to the family empire without ever letting anyone see how heavy it was. Watching him bury his face against my shoulder while blushing like an embarrassed teenager completely shattered the image they had built over decades. Meanwhile, I remained blissfully unaware that millions of strangers were witnessing one of our completely ordinary interactions. Once I was satisfied he had calmed down, I gently nudged him away and picked up my phone again. "Happy now?" I teased. Ethan cleared his throat, straightened his posture, and transformed back into the calm executive everyone recognized. "Much better," he admitted before opening his laptop at the coffee table to finish reviewing documents he'd brought home from work. I returned to my game, assuming everything had gone back to normal. It hadn't. Every few seconds I felt someone watching me. At first I ignored the sensation. Eventually it became impossible. I glanced sideways. Ethan's fingers moved across the keyboard with practiced speed, yet every few moments his eyes drifted away from the screen and settled on me instead. The first few times I pretended not to notice. By the sixth or seventh glance, my patience disappeared. I shifted my body so my back faced him. Surely that would solve the problem. It didn't. A minute later the feeling returned. Turning around, I discovered he'd quietly picked up his laptop and moved to the opposite side of the table so he could see my face again. I stared at him in disbelief. "Seriously?" He looked genuinely confused. "What?" "Stop staring at me." "I wasn't." "You absolutely were." "I was thinking." I pointed two fingers toward my own eyes before pointing at him. "You are visually bothering me." The live stream chat erupted with laughter. For the first time since the broadcast had begun, people weren't talking about scandals, Victoria, or divorce rumors. They were trying to understand why the supposedly cold billionaire kept finding excuses to look at his wife while she acted as though his attention was the most normal thing in the world. Some viewers insisted I was being rude. Others admitted Ethan looked strangely clingy. Inside the Carter family home, Chloe slowly noticed details she had never expected to see. The minimalist living room she'd imagined from magazine interviews was filled with traces of another person. Bright throw pillows covered the couch. A cartoon mug sat beside Ethan's laptop. A tiny cactus wearing googly eyes decorated the coffee table. A soft blanket covered in little stars was folded neatly over the armrest. None of those things matched her brother's famously elegant taste. Somehow, instead of looking out of place, they made the house feel warm and lived in. She suddenly realized something that unsettled her. Ethan hadn't sacrificed his personality by marrying me. He had simply built a home where both of us existed together. That thought lingered far longer than she wanted to admit. Meanwhile, I finally gave up trying to concentrate on my game. Groaning dramatically, I stood from the beanbag and stretched. "Fine. I'm going to the bedroom so you can stop watching me every 30 seconds. Ethan's fingers froze above the keyboard. "Where are you going?" "Away from your surveillance." He frowned. I'm not surveilling you. Really? Then why do I keep catching you staring? For the first time all evening, he actually looked embarrassed. He opened his mouth as though preparing an explanation before quietly closing it again. I couldn't stop myself from laughing. Beneath the polished image of America's most intimidating CEO was simply a man who hated it whenever I disappeared from his sight for too long. Neither of us realized the internet had just begun rewriting everything it thought it knew about our marriage. I had barely taken 2 steps before I felt a gentle tug on the sleeve of my oversized hoodie. Looking down, I found Ethan's hand loosely wrapped around the fabric as though he hadn't even realized he'd reached for me. He wasn't gripping tightly, but he also wasn't letting go. I raised an eyebrow. "You're holding me." Without looking in my direction, he calmly replied, "No, I'm not." I stared at him for a second before glancing down at the very obvious evidence. "Ethan, your hand is literally on my sleeve." He finally looked down as if noticing it for the first time. "I'm just resting it there." I couldn't help laughing. "Resting it on my clothes?" He cleared his throat, maintaining the serious expression he wore during board meetings. "It's comfortable." The live stream comment section completely imploded. Thousands of viewers typed so quickly the system struggled to keep up. Some insisted they were hallucinating. Others demanded Carter Dynamics admit this was an elaborate comedy series disguised as a product demonstration. The country's most respected CEO was arguing that he was resting his hand on his wife's sleeve while refusing to let her walk away. Chloe covered her face with both hands. "This cannot be my brother," she groaned. Their father rubbed his forehead while their mother quietly watched the screen with an expression that had softened considerably since the broadcast began. I sighed the sigh of someone who had dealt with this exact situation countless times before. My game had already saved automatically anyway, so instead of continuing toward the bedroom, I sat back down beside him. The moment I did, Ethan subtly shifted closer until our shoulders touched. Less than a minute later he leaned his head against mine as naturally as if it had always belonged there. I smiled without thinking and absent-mindedly ran my fingers through his dark hair while reopening my game. The movement was completely automatic. I'd done it so many times I didn't even realize I was doing it anymore. Ethan immediately became perfectly still, almost as if he were afraid moving would make me stop. His eyes drifted shut for a few peaceful seconds. The live stream viewers couldn't believe what they were seeing. "Is she petting the billionaire?" one comment read. "Forget golden retriever energy," another person wrote. "This man is an oversized house cat." Someone else added, "We've spent 4 years believing she chased him. Meanwhile he's over here acting like he physically can't survive 10 feet away from his wife." The mood of the chat slowly began to change. The cruel jokes that had dominated the beginning of the stream appeared less frequently, replaced by genuine confusion. None of this matched the story people had spent years believing. If our marriage was fake, then why did Ethan look so completely relaxed whenever I touched him? Why did he seem happier sitting beside me while I played a mobile game than standing on stage accepting business awards? At the Carter estate, silence filled the living room. Finally, Ethan's father spoke. "He's happy." His wife nodded almost immediately. "I've never seen him look this comfortable." He leaned back thoughtfully before giving a quiet laugh. "Maybe we were looking at everything from the wrong angle." Chloe remained silent. Memories she had ignored for years suddenly resurfaced. Every family dinner Ethan had insisted I attend despite everyone's obvious discomfort. Every holiday when he quietly left conversations early because I had gone upstairs. Every time she assumed he was only fulfilling obligations instead of choosing to be with me. She realized she had never actually asked her brother whether he loved his wife. She had simply believed what the internet repeated every day. Across the city, another person was also watching every second of the live stream. Victoria Hayes sat alone inside her elegant apartment with untouched tea growing cold beside her laptop. She had convinced herself the broadcast would be harmless publicity. Ethan was famously private. Surely he would behave professionally from beginning to end. That confidence disappeared the moment she heard him softly ask me not to leave. She had known Ethan for years. They had attended charity events together, business dinners, movie premieres, and interviews. She knew the polished version of him better than almost anyone outside his family. Yet the man leaning against his wife's shoulder while quietly enjoying gentle affection felt like a complete stranger. She searched her memory for a single moment when he had ever looked at her that way. There wasn't one. He had always been courteous, respectful, helpful when she needed advice. But there had always been an invisible distance between them, one she had mistaken for restraint instead of simple emotional boundaries. Watching him now, she finally understood the difference. He wasn't incapable of affection. He had simply never wanted to give that part of himself to anyone except me. The realization settled heavily in her chest. Meanwhile, I remained blissfully unaware of the emotional crisis unfolding in thousands of homes across the country. My biggest concern at that moment involved a bowl of caramel popcorn sitting on the coffee table. I reached for it only for Ethan's hand to appear at exactly the same time. He stole a handful before I could stop him. Seriously? I complained. You don't even like popcorn. He calmly ate one piece with the expression of someone enduring great hardship. I like yours. I laughed. That makes absolutely no sense. It doesn't have to. I narrowed my eyes suspiciously before hugging the bowl protectively against my chest. Get your own. Yours tastes better. It's the exact same popcorn. I disagree. The live stream erupted once again. Viewers who had arrived expecting scandals instead found themselves watching a billionaire steal snacks from his wife simply because they belonged to her. Some admitted they were smiling without realizing it. Others confessed they suddenly felt guilty for believing years of rumors without questioning them. Clips from the stream were already spreading across every social media platform. The hashtags calling for our divorce quietly disappeared beneath entirely new trends. Videos titled "The CEO Who Couldn't Stop Looking at His Wife" began collecting millions of views within hours. Nobody knew it yet, but the carefully constructed fantasy surrounding Ethan and Victoria was beginning to collapse under the weight of something much stronger than gossip. For the first time, people weren't seeing the relationship they wanted to believe in. They were witnessing the one that had existed all along. The next morning I woke up completely unaware that the internet had spent the entire night arguing about my marriage. I stretched lazily, wandered downstairs wearing another ridiculous oversized hoodie, and found Ethan already standing in the kitchen making coffee. He looked perfectly composed in tailored trousers and a crisp white shirt, as if he hadn't spent the previous evening acting like an affectionate puppy on camera. "Morning," I mumbled, reaching for my favorite mug. "Morning," he answered, watching me with that familiar softness he never showed anyone else. I poured myself coffee, opened the refrigerator, and frowned. "Where's the cheesecake?" He hesitated for exactly 1 second before quietly admitting, "I finished it." I slowly turned toward him. "You ate my cheesecake?" "It was in the refrigerator. It was hidden behind the vegetables. I found it." I folded my arms. That was strategic cheesecake. I was saving it. Without another word, he picked up his phone and ordered 2 entire cheesecakes from my favorite bakery. Problem solved. I laughed despite trying not to. "You're impossible. You married me anyway." Before I could answer, his assistant suddenly called. Ethan listened silently for nearly a minute while his expression grew increasingly unreadable. When he finally hung up, he rubbed the bridge of his nose. "The live stream." I blinked. "What live stream?" He stared at me. "You didn't know?" My smile disappeared. "Know what?" A long silence followed. "The drone followed me yesterday." Another pause. "Into the house." I waited. It was broadcasting live. My brain stopped working. Live? He nodded once. How many people? Another pause. Several million. I simply stared at him. Then I slowly replayed everything that had happened the previous afternoon. Me pushing his face away. Him refusing to let go of my sleeve. The popcorn. The hair. The cuddling. Every embarrassing, private little habit we'd developed over the years had apparently become public entertainment. I covered my face with both hands. Please tell me I imagined all of that. Unfortunately. He said carefully, you did not. I groaned loud enough for the neighbors to hear. Ethan stepped closer before gently removing my hands from my face. I'm sorry, he said quietly. I didn't know the camera was still following me. I looked at him for a long moment before sighing. None of this was your fault. People have treated you unfairly for years. His voice became noticeably softer. I should have corrected them sooner. That sentence surprised me more than anything else. Ethan rarely expressed regret. He solved problems instead of talking about them. Seeing guilt in his eyes made my heart ache. I reached up and kissed his cheek. You can correct them now. Something shifted in his expression. He nodded once before leaving for work. 3 days later, Carter Dynamics unexpectedly announced a press conference. Every major news outlet attended, assuming it would focus on the company's drone technology. Instead, after answering a few technical questions, Ethan calmly stepped toward the microphone. A journalist predictably asked whether the live stream had changed anything regarding the long-standing rumors involving Victoria Hayes. Ethan looked directly into the cameras. Yes, he answered evenly. It reminded me that allowing false stories to continue can hurt innocent people. The room fell silent. Victoria Hayes has always been someone I respected professionally. Nothing more. There has never been a romantic relationship between us. Reporters immediately began shouting new questions. Ethan calmly raised one hand. I married Olivia because I wanted to. Nobody manipulated me. Nobody forced me. She is my wife because she is the person I chose. Another reporter nervously asked whether he regretted marrying a celebrity whose reputation had caused so much controversy. Ethan didn't hesitate. Not for a single second. He paused before delivering the sentence that instantly dominated every headline around the world. She belongs beside me, and I belong beside her. That has always been the truth, regardless of what strangers decided to believe. I watched the entire press conference from a recording studio where I had been preparing for my next album. By the time he stepped away from the podium, tears had already blurred my vision. Social media exploded within minutes. Old compilation videos pairing Ethan with Victoria were replaced by clips from the live stream showing him following me around the house, stealing my popcorn, refusing to let me leave the couch, and blushing whenever I kissed him. Public opinion shifted with astonishing speed. Influencers who had mocked me uploaded apology videos. Entertainment journalists admitted they had relied on assumptions instead of facts. Even people who still disliked me could no longer deny what millions had witnessed with their own eyes. Ethan hadn't been trapped in our marriage. If anything, he seemed hopelessly attached to his wife. Victoria released a brief statement wishing us happiness before quietly stepping away from the conversation. For the first time in years, her name was no longer linked with Ethan's. A week later my phone rang while I was making breakfast. Chloe's name flashed across the screen. I hesitated before answering. Hi. There was an awkward silence. Finally she spoke. I owe you an apology. I leaned against the kitchen counter without interrupting. I believed everyone else instead of believing my own brother, she admitted. Watching the live stream. I realized I've been unfair to you for years. Her voice cracked slightly before she continued. If you're willing. I'd really like another chance. I smiled. I'd like that too. She laughed nervously. Can I finally call you my sister-in-law? I glanced across the kitchen where Ethan was pretending to read a report while obviously listening to every word. I think it's about time. Months later, Carter Dynamics launched another promotional live stream. This time everyone knew the cameras were coming. Millions of viewers gathered anyway, not because they cared about drones, but because they wanted to see what our ordinary life actually looked like. Ethan came home that evening, greeted me with a kiss, quietly corrected a few lyrics I had been struggling to finish, then wrapped his arms around me from behind while reading over my shoulder. Nobody questioned whether his affection was genuine anymore. The comment section wasn't filled with hatred this time. Instead, people joked about the popcorn thief CEO, laughed whenever he unconsciously followed me from room to room, and admitted they had completely misunderstood our relationship for years. Looking back now, I realize the funniest part wasn't that millions of strangers had finally discovered my husband's secret. It was that I hadn't fully understood it myself until everyone else saw it too. The world believed I had spent years chasing an untouchable billionaire. In reality, the cold, intimidating CEO everyone admired had quietly been following me around our home all along, stealing my snacks, watching me whenever I left the room, and finding endless excuses just to stay close. Sometimes the greatest love stories aren't hidden because they're complicated. They're hidden because everyone is too busy believing the wrong one.